Yeah, you want to introduce the talk, Milk? You can do a good monologue, I heard.
Okay, so basically the idea is the question is basically the topic is what is spiritual or what is spirituality? We want to try to answer this first of all because I think the concept is interesting. Second of all, because I've heard more than one person, usually atheists, say that they don't understand what the word means. And I don't, at the moment, I don't think, I'm inclined to say the word is not pointless or meaningless. To me, it has meaning, or at least I like to think it has meaning. I'm open to the idea. I'm open to discuss the possibility that the word is useless, but I'm not convinced as of yet. So it's simply going to be an inquiry into the concept of spiritual, the spiritual, spirituality, and see if we can find some kind of a consensus. That's the goal. This was unnecessarily verbal, probably.
No, it's good for the listeners to have a good idea what it's going to be about.
Yeah. So basically, what first comes to your mind when you sort of hear the word spiritual? What does that mean to you?
Face, you want to jump in?
But yeah, I mean, just to me, it's like kind of, not the opposite of, but almost like the opposite of naturalism, right? Yeah, so like there's a supernaturalism aspect to reality and life, you know what I mean? So, if someone says they're spiritual, I think what they mean is they're not quite religious, but they believe that they have a spirit, that there is spirits, whether in people or even beyond, this realm, that kind of thing. So, but maybe I could be wrong. I know some people just use it as like a word for like almost like a hippie, like someone who just, has joss sticks and stuff. But yeah, I think, I haven't really checked the definition recently, but people tend to use it in that way, right? That spirituality is like the belief in spirits and the spiritual realm, that kind of thing. What do you reckon?
Yeah.
In spirits.
Yeah, the thing is, in spirituality, the word itself has different meanings on different levels. And for a while in the first half of the 20th century, it was literally the belief in other spirits and dead spirits of dead people. And it was a very popular movement called spiritualism in the United States and also in the UK. And it was very popular for a while to hold a séance together around a circle, everybody together, and then call dead spirits. That was a pastime before we had Discord. Way back.
In the times of yore, when there was no Discord.
Yeah, in the good old times, the good old days, man, before the internet. So that's what people used to do, like with the Ouija boards too, like a pastime, like entertainment, basically, even.
Right, like in the dark ages of like the early 2000s or
something. No. Basically, what I was saying was that someone like Nikola Tesla was very rational and logical, and invented a lot of inventions, radar, electricity. He gave us our current society, basically. And he was very heavily involved in later on in spiritualism, in talking to dead spirits, even trying to talk to people from Mars through his machines. So it was, even he did it as a scientist.
Yeah. So the first point we're raising is séances. So obviously séances and not naturalism. So when you say, for example, not naturalism, you mean something, quote, supernatural? So obviously now we have to pull in other concepts, I guess?
I mean, I guess so, yeah. I mean, I suppose, or not, or maybe when I say naturalism, maybe I'm being a little bit synonymous with like materialism. So in other words, that there's more to life and reality than just what we see. There's like a mind above matter, that kind of thing.
Yeah, like the invisible realm, the unseen.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, which we can feel maybe sometimes, but we cannot touch or grasp or show it to others.
So are we talking about something that does it come down to basically something that only some see and some others, or only some experience, whereas others don't experience this. Is that? I mean, obviously, that's not enough for a definition of the spiritual. I mean, obviously, for example, a mathematician, of course, experiences something that a non-mathematician doesn't have access to. But we're talking about something
it gets into how you define the word, right? Because you could you could isolate it down to, like, as you're kind of implying, that someone's kind of got to be spiritual, to be spiritual. But you could, if you're going to be consistent within a spiritual framework, then you would say someone who's not who's not spiritual is just having a negative spiritual experience. You know what I mean, or something like that. You see what I mean?
Like, when you say negative spiritual experience, what comes to my mind is someone experiencing sort of demons haunting him. Like, I mean,
that'd be an extreme. That would be an extreme. But what I mean is, someone who's just so busy, I don't know, just focusing on the mechanical side of life, might be, there'll still be, I believe there's a spirit within their being, that's experiencing all this.
Yeah.
But it would be, but they wouldn't be having it depends on how you use the word. It wouldn't be what you would look at as a spiritual experience, but it's a spirit going through an experience. So you could say it's not the best spiritual experience, but still within it. You know what I mean? If you're consistent within spirituality, I guess, depending on how we use that word again.
You mean we can sort of think of it like the number line with negative spiritual experiences, very neutral, quote, spiritual experiences, and positive?
I suppose it depends again on how you use the word. You know what I mean? But you can see what I mean. If you believe, people have spirit and stuff like that, and there's a spiritual side to life, then when people are down in the dumps, digging a trench or something, they're just having to do the darker side of the spiritual side of things, if you see what I mean.
So we're saying that digging a ditch is that a spiritual experience?
I think he's saying there's a lot to be learned from the dark side.
When he said that about the ditch, so moments before that, I was thinking, because I have heard that some would define it as anything can be spiritual if you have the correct attitude, sort of that kind of background. It's not limited, either not limited or not necessarily limited to what you're doing, but how you're doing the thing you're doing, kind of thing.
That's almost like a bit like when a Buddha or someone like that, a monk, sets himself on fire, and they sit and they meditate and they die in meditation because they're sort of being, like say, in that spiritual mode, right?
Yeah, it's basically how you choose to deal with the experience, how you interpret it, how you decode it into your brain, maybe, how you choose to look at it. I mean, setting yourself to fire to one person is like a horrible experience, but to that monk, it's a spiritual experience,
Or I mean, it's possible that to him it's just like a very stoic experience. He's just sacrificing himself like a
but they smile. They smile when they do it. They're still accepting the experience, the torment and everything.
Yeah,
as something very positive. They choose to.
I think there must be a big difference, though, surely, between people who what's the word? I've forgotten what the word is now. That's much more of a protest act, isn't it? Because I've seen, I don't know whether they're real or not, but you see kind of preserved Buddhist monks that have apparently died in meditation. There's a few preserved ones in Thailand that have kind of chosen to step out. And I kind of believe that is something you can do with enough control over your own mind. You can actually step out and choose when to die. I think some people are able to do that. But I think that is the setting fire to oneself, not more of an act of protest, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a protest, but at the same time, because it's a monk, because they're spiritual in everything all day long.
Oh yeah, from
their objective perspective, from their inside the brain, how they experience it, how they choose to experience it.
They're going to go into it smiling. Yeah, it would be. Yeah, that amount of pain.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
But to somebody else who, if you put me on fire, I would start screaming and yelling and crying and everything. I wouldn't like it, you know.
Unless you get a few more reps at the gym out of it, then you might consider it.
Feel the burn, you know. Like
Maybe a little cigarette burn to get a few more reps out.
Feel the pump. Yeah, I mean, it seems very subjective, and part of it seems how you, as a human, choose to deal with things, whatever happens.
So, are we any closer to a definition of spiritual?
No.
I feel like we're still sort of raising,
circling around it. You know,
a little bit. Yeah,
we're doing we're how do you call it, reconnaissance? You know, we're getting into the field. You know, doing a field test, looking out at the terrain. You know, see what's up.
Yeah.
Because it sounds woo-woo, doesn't it, spirituality? But most people, even rational atheist people, still go by a set of rules, which is mostly do as you would be done by. And, you know.
You mean ethics, basically?
Yeah. It depends on, are we talking about ethics or are we talking about different, you know, dimensions, as it were? Heaven, hell? Or
like we said before, spirits of dead people. You know, like ancestors worship in old shamanistic traditions. You know.
Yeah, well, I mean that's harder for some people to believe than others, and it depends what you've experienced.
Yes, so there are different meanings to it anyway, I think.
Let's try this. So, if you have views about ethics, or you practice ethics, or both, maybe you practice ethics but you have no views, or you have views but you don't practice, or you have both, you have views and you practice them. Is that enough to make someone spiritual?
How would you verify as an external observer, as a third party? How would you verify? That's the issue.
How would you verify
if it's real spirituality or not? How would you measure something like that?
Well, I mean, obviously, you would have to, like, if we were to say ethics defines spirituality, we would have to have some kind of ethics would have to be we would have to have a definition of, like, if you have these particular views, then you are spiritual, and if you're halfway there, and if you practice the thing fully, then you really are spiritual. And then if it were limited to ethics, we would basically be saying it's just the views and practice of ethics, period.
I guess it's not really just the practice of ethics. I suppose I've just said that, I suppose, because I've been influenced by what I keep hearing people on chat panels talking about morality, and about if you're not a theist, you don't have a firm basis to come from, and you have no, you know, right to talk about morality, or no place to base your morality on. So I've been influenced, I suppose, by that. That's why I said ethics, I suppose.
That is another interesting discussion we have to take later. That's a discussion in and of itself, whether non-believers can or cannot have ethical sort of standards, which I have to say I myself find sort of, it's a bit alien, because, I mean, in short, whatever culture you come from or whatever upbringing you come from, regardless of whether you leave the religion, you sort of, the people around you will put their mark on you, and it will follow you.
Yeah.
Even if you leave the religion, the belief system, the club, and so on. But I mean, obviously you could reject some of it or all of it, but it will still have shaped you in a certain way. So anyway, let's try to stick to the topic. So let's say we have a person who has basically views about what is ethical and practices what he believes to be ethical. And let's say, so another thing that definitely comes to mind that we have to maybe take care of here is that, is it possible that people who are seen as spiritual, that they have higher ethical standards than normal people, sort of non-spiritual people?
Like material people, basically.
Yeah, okay, we can label them material people.
Yeah, people who don't believe in, like hard atheists, people who don't believe in anything beyond the material realm that we can see.
Yeah, okay. Let's say we have this individual who is only a materialist, and let's say he says, I get my spirituality, or I get my ethical standards from basically like something like a social contract. So I practice the golden rule because if I don't do it, then everyone's gonna, rob me, steal from me, murder me, or steal from my family or some one of my relatives, and so on. So you just do it out of necessity. Well, that could be one view out there. You could have obviously materialists that have that wouldn't necessarily say they only do it for the on the basis of a social contract
or a selfish motive.
Yeah. I mean, the social contract it sounds very much based in selfishness in this sense.
Yeah.
You're good just so that other people also stay good. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this idea that someone who is spiritual has this higher standard.
If someone puts themselves forward as elevated amongst others in any way, you would expect them to display a higher standard. Well, if they promote themselves as a particular kind of theist, whatever it is,
yeah,
well, you would kind of then expect them to then display the standards that they preach.
So okay, yeah, that's another good point.
I've met hardline materialists, kind of, this is all there is, then it goes black.
Yeah.
And I can't say I've ever found them any less kind or compassionate, or do you know what I mean? You find some very kind, compassionate, generous, kind of caring, and generally positive traits among those people as well. It's,
Yeah.
There's a funny thing to that though. It's like, in a way, this gets a bit deep again, but like they, it's like they live as if like, naturalism and materialism are false, in their general day to day. Like you say, that they have righteousness and kindness, and love and decency, which aren't really material, are material things as such, But then they, you know what I mean? It's kind of it's an interesting kind of catch-22 that they say no, there's no such thing, it's all material, and then they say love you, bro, and it's like, wow. I mean, was that a chemical reaction? Was that a chemical reaction in your brain that said that, or was that you? Like, yeah.
Can you touch on that again?
It's like, I suppose what I mean is, if materialism is true, then when you say love you to someone, all you're doing is acting out the material, the chemical reactions and synapsi within your brain that you couldn't really control. It gets into, it gets even into free will and all of that. But if basically if materialism is true, there is no mind over matter. It's just matter over matter, right? You know what I mean? So you wouldn't have total control. You just have the illusion of control, I guess. Which doesn't make sense why you'd have the illusion of control, in a system out of control. But anyway, like I say, it's a bit of a rabbit hole. But
you still blurted out, "I love you." Or where did that come from?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is not non-material.
Seems to mean more.
Exactly.
Yeah, did it come from the spirit or did it come from the body?
Yeah, I mean, it seems weird, doesn't it, to say, to say to someone, "I love you." Well, my brain chemistry loves you, not me, but you know what I mean? It just seems
the oxytocin made me do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that you're describing is, I think, it's more correct to call it determinism rather than materialism. I'm not convinced that materialism necessarily means determinism or equates to determinism.
Right, yeah.
When I say that, I mean in imagination. I can imagine a materialist world where people also happen to have free will.
Right, yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on arguing this point, but anyone I talk to who's smart and into atheism or naturalism, they pretty much say, no, hard determinism is a must. It's like, because, they claim that, the universe sprung into existence and whatever chemical reactions would be, and that, ultimately the words coming out of their mouth, though they seem like they are making choices, they couldn't have chosen otherwise, because ultimately there is no mind over matter. Do you know what I mean? They might not word it like that, but someone like Rob, who's really intelligent, will affirm basically hard determinism, as far as I can tell.
I'm not sure if he's a hard determinist, but
Mm-hmm.
you might be correct here in the sense that some of the conversations we've had earlier sort of seem to suggest that physics is kind of deterministic. So when we say, or we sort of allude to materialism, if that refers to, let's say physics is 100% deterministic, hard determinism. So obviously, if physics does describe the behavior of the material world, then it does seem sort of inescapable that you have to agree that the material world, or the sort of the worldview of the materialist, is deterministic, I guess, unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, no, I think that's basically what I'm doing. I'm just showing the connection, how it seems to imply the other. Basically. So
I'm not sure we fully explored this idea of ethics. So it sort of came up earlier about the question of whether spiritual people, quote, spiritual people, have higher standards of ethics versus whether they only have, either they themselves only believe, or they sort of have this, they make up this sort of an aura or a reputation that they are very ethical, whereas they might be worse, they might be less ethical, or just as ethical as anyone else, or for all we know, more ethical, but don't show it. So they might show it, they might not show it, they might have this reputation of being like really, really ethical, whereas they're in reality not, or they have the reputation and they're sort of that really their behavior fits the reputation, and so on. So there's all kinds of possibilities that could be here, of course.
Sure. Would you say that it's probably hard to even that it probably it probably would not plot on a graph, would it? Meaning that you could be hard atheistic and our friend said that you could be just as friendly, just as caring, and maybe inconsistent with your claimed views, but still regardless, you could still be, very ethical, very kind, very Christian in a sense, very kind of spiritual, or whatever, you know what I mean? There's, perhaps.
The only difference I myself can think of at the moment is that if let's say if a religious person has a sort of more reason to be sort of go to higher levels, so to speak, of ethical standards, that would be because they are sort of trying to put into practice to step in the shoes of the role model. So for example, if your role model is Jesus, you're trying to embody Jesus as well as you can, or at least how you interpret his character to have been.
Yeah, that's often the case.
I'm inclined to say most religious people are just as ethical as anyone else. They're not more ethical, not less. They're probably
the same.
They usually display the same traits as other humans.
Yeah.
They usually display the same traits as other humans. That's what I've noticed. Yeah. I remember my first experience of. I go back to childhood and think about the lovely ladies in flowery dresses that put the flowers out and put the hymn numbers out and kind of made the church nice for Sunday mornings. And like the good Christian ladies, and they were the most backbiting, bitchy, spiteful people. And I remember as a child thinking, aren't you the opposite of what this is supposed to be? Do you know what I mean? Because I kind of grew up, I was in a church choir. Do you know what I mean? I went to church every Sunday, and it struck me at a really early age that some of the most good Christian people were some of the most awful opposite, displayed the most opposite behaviour of what they claimed to do for an hour behind a hymn book.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I fully agree. I mean, that gets into that whole, what is a Christian and who is a Christian and that whole vibe. You know what I mean? You could have like a million people in a mega church with some crazy pastor like Joel Osteen, with a big shiny teeth and saying, "Just give me your money now," and like,
Creflo Dollar, man. He's funny too.
Who was the first one? Billy Graham. Didn't he get done for something?
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, I think it was both him and Jimmy Swaggart that they probably. Well, I know Jimmy Swaggart. He slept with a prostitute. I think Billy Graham maybe also had some similar.
I think
incident.
It was something sexual, but I can't remember what it was. Yeah, I can't remember it.
Yeah, it often is sexual. Some sexual scandal.
Yeah, they often display the same traits, and maybe sometimes worse if they try and repress them. I think that was something I had a discussion with the other day. Do you think the repression of kind of sexuality because like some religious people practice this repression of sexuality in certain areas, and I was saying, do you think that lashes out in kind of can it make people more sexually aggressive or rapey in some way? Can it express itself in a different way, be that kind of Catholic priests fucking choir boys, or be that Islamic rape grooming circles? Do you know what I mean? Whichever you want to take that from, because it often expresses itself in it's another thing. People will repress a natural order in the name of a religion.
Yeah. It's better to get things at least out, of your heart, I guess, rather than repress, right? You like you say, you are on some level you're a fleshly being as well, or even you might be a fully naturalist, but on some level you're a physical fleshly being, right? That has you must eat, you must sleep. Exactly. Yeah. So by trying to suppress stuff, it just makes it twice as bad, doesn't it? Like I must admit, I was thinking of I agree that Catholics, or some, suppose, 1 in 100,000 or whatever Catholic priests, or I don't even know the numbers, but you know what I mean. Obviously, completely perverted, completely satanic, whatever you want to call it, right? For sure, right? But I was thinking of the Islamic gangs, like you said, like it just seems that they have all these rules. Don't look at a woman, don't do this, don't do that, don't touch her, don't talk to her. And then they end up.
Do you think this just amplifies? Yeah, amplifies and comes out. It lashes out in a bad way. Well, I think it doesn't really matter what the religion is. It's just kind of.
Sure. Yeah. It just so happens that one's got very strict kind of rules against women, right? Yeah.
Yoga also has this, by the way, about repressing the sexual urge.
Tantra.
Again, depends what you mean by tantra. So what you might see in yoga would be like they will try to repress body movements. They will try to repress breathing. They will try to repress thinking and the sexual urge. And the idea basically is that you want to repress all of these things that are sort of part of the human experience to, in some sense, deny your humanity. And not, when I say deny humanity, I don't mean become some kind of a monster, but you're sort of
kind of like deny the flesh, kind of.
Yeah, kind of like that. I think the Catholics probably have a similar idea, but I think obviously what does can go wrong there is that if they're not successful in the repression, killing of the sexual urge, or redirecting of the energy, or whatever you do with the energy, if you don't succeed in working with the energy, either redirecting it or rooting it out, then obviously it's going to manifest in choir boys or some other way. So I'm not sure, I think if there were any easy way out here, it would be to sort of make this maybe measurable by the medical community, maybe. So, they could sort of really tell if the sexual urge is still repressed or not, or rooted out or not. Neuroscientists, maybe I'm just fantasizing.
I mean, I suppose like if you're under the age of 30 or something, you're never going to get the urge out. I don't suppose. You know what I mean?
Well, like I said, I know of people who claim to be able to do this. So, and I have to say for myself, I don't know how to do this properly. But at the same time, I know the ones who claim to be able to do it, supposedly they put a lot of work into it. So, and obviously, since I haven't actually gone through that work, I can't actually say too much about it.
Is this in a yoga framework? Are you talking about people that kind of repress?
Yeah.
Kind of do well, I don't know if they repress it in the same way. I can believe, because I don't practice those things, but from my understanding of kind of tantric yoga, it isn't really denial. Do you know what I mean? They acknowledge it's there, and occasionally it's expressed. There's no specific, kind of deny, like you can't. Do you know what I mean? So maybe that the addition of choice, because often it's more about strengthening the muscle. I think people kind of practice building up sexual kind of energy or whatever, and then releasing it. It's not about saying you never can. Where the Catholics, it's like you just can't. You're celibate or whatever it is.
I would say it depends on the school that you are part of. So, for example, if you were part of some kind of tantric school, they might actually be playing with the energy, meaning they're not rooting it out.
Yeah.
But the traditional view is that you don't.
You can just don't redirect it into the
Well, the traditional view is that you basically you root out the sexual urge. You basically remove it. You take it out of your system. You take it out of the mind, because it is, or at least seems to be, very mental. It is a sort of you're dwelling on this desire for.
Well, you just rewire it as an energy source.
Yeah, that's.
I prefer that approach. I could have sex. I could write a piece of music. Let's try and do a piece of music instead.
I guess that depends what you mean by rewiring, because if you mean rewiring by not rooting it out but redirecting the sort of in that way, versus redirecting, because like if I root out the sexual urge, obviously the energy that used to go into that is going to go somewhere else. So it's still in some sense redirecting, you could say.
Yeah.
But it's just not going through the sexual channel, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I think maybe we're derailing a little bit.
Derailing, yeah.
So okay, let's try to get back to the topic. So okay, we've tried to look a little bit into ethics, if that suffices to define the spiritual. Another thing that sort of came up earlier was this thing about séances and spirits. So, is it a requirement to be experiencing spirits to be, quote, spiritual?
Depends how you see it as spirits. I don't know. The minute you say that, it makes me cringe. Do you know what I mean? But at the same time, it's not beyond my realm of depth of understanding we have overlaying layers of reality and time as far as I can make out. Do you know what I mean? There are multiple different universes going on in the same space at the same time, whether we like it or not, or understand it or not, whether that sounds woo-woo itself. So it's not so unbelievable, it depends what you define as a spirit or a ghost, or I've seen a kind of foot walking past in the bath and thought, is that a playback from, or just a few frames? We don't know how time works. We don't know how energetic kind of signatures work. It's
it seems to sort of depend on the model, the interpretation you have of the experience. So, for example, like what came to my mind was a spirit could obviously also be, I would argue, a projection from your mind.
Yeah.
But I guess it gets a little more complicated if multiple people are seeing the same thing, the exact same thing, in which case it's not impossible for a lot of people to trip out at the same time. But I guess
people will share hallucinations.
Say again?
People will share hallucinations as well.
Well, I'm not too familiar with that.
It's a thing.
Oh, it is.
It is possible. Yeah. It is possible. It might not be super common, but it is possible.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, what is there a good explanation as to what that is, apart from sort of the first inclination, which is to go to, oh, there must be some reality to this because many people are.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you say that. There's actually a book called, I think you own it. I think you might own it. It's Spirit Molecule. Yeah, by is it Dr. Strassman? I think.
Yeah, it's one of those books I've had and never got back.
But yeah. So I mean, so he, in that's I think it ends up, it's quite scholarly. It might be peer reviewed or whatever, and it seems to indicate that there's a spiritual realm. Even that can be unlocked with a chemical, DMT or So yeah, it kind of, I suppose that links into what we're talking about.
Yes. Okay. That's a good point. So now we're basically moving into this idea that maybe you have to do some work, possibly in your body, to have a quote spiritual experience, possibly.
Yeah. Chemically based. It doesn't.
That'd be one way, I guess. Yeah, that'd be one field, because like obviously a Shaolin monk or something would tell you, no, you don't need chemical. You can do this. You can induce it through prayer or through meditation.
There's cases of monks being given LSD, isn't there? And they've just kind of been like, yeah, and it gave me a bit of a headache. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's one aspect of it. So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily the definition, but it's part of it. It's like I say, this is a huge subject. That I'm brothers. Lots of things.
So there was one thing that I didn't really I didn't touch on earlier about the ethics that I sort of want to touch on before I forget it. So there's one possible argument for sort of the connection between quote spirituality and ethics, and I guess it in some sense is sort of connected to the body, the mind and the body, in the sense that if I, for example, restrain the sexual urge, so the sexual urge feels from the first person obviously very subjective, but at the same time, if I refrain from expressing the urge, then obviously something will happen in the body if I restrain it, at least if I succeed in restraining it. I think often what will happen is that you will maybe start sweating, you will maybe you will get sort of, I don't know, restless, you'll get sort of the urge will maybe sort of intensify and so on, or you'll get more obsessed about the object of desire.
I think that's something that a lot of people do. A lot of people get obsessed about the object of the thing they're trying to not do.
Yeah.
It has to, whatever it is you're doing, you have to express it in some way, be it yoga, even just deciding to go to a yoga class on a Sunday morning and not stay in bed shagging. It is worthwhile. And I suppose being a bit of a creative, I've got a lot of my friends. I've got one in particular. It's like, oh God, I wish I had something to do like you, like write music or make a Photoshop picture, because I just spend too much time looking at porn. I can't turn it off. And I suppose, it has to express. I kind of thought, well, yeah, at least I turn it off because I put a pair of headphones on, or I make a picture or something. Do you know what I mean? But that's still kind of. Otherwise, that I know where my mind would be going were I not sort of doing something creative. Do you know what I mean? I have to do something. It has to be expressed somewhere.
No fab for a while. And I've managed to extend it a pretty long time, and even no sex, but just to see if I could manage it as an experiment. I like to try out extreme things I haven't tried before. So.
Couple of weeks at a time.
I've done prolonged, much longer. But I can't remember exactly how long. But what happens with me is, it was also during a time when I did calorie restriction diets for a longer duration. I ate much less, or some less than I would need, basically to function, because it promoted some health effects, and a lot of yogis and other types of people have done it too. And so I wanted to try out what it does for myself. And I experienced it with a low-calorie diet. It automatically lowers desire for sex. The body just turns it down. And that is a great aid, because with low calories, you're surviving, man. Your body is stressed. You don't turn to sex. You don't even think about it after a while. After a few months, it goes out of your reality. No, but I'm serious. After a while, I didn't even feel like having sex. And or even porn or whatever. I didn't watch porn for months, and I could let it go. And only after a while, when I really chose to, like, it seems like I had free will, I started the process up again, it seemed. And after I started, let's say, self-pleasuring, to keep it a little bit civilized, and watching pornographic erotic materials, online, I started, it seems like I went back to the old pattern, to the old program. And because I was busy putting energy into it and forming my mind into it, I made it bigger. And then after a while, I went back to the old time porn addiction type of mentality again. Like also almost like OCD, like addiction almost. I've learned to go back into it whenever I want, with low calorie diet and a few other tricks.
Okay, so what is the connection between this and spirituality?
Spiritual disciplines, aren't there?
Yeah, a lot of religions, even the Catholic Church, the monks in the Middle Ages, they had to practice celibacy, and the nuns, and they put that energy they supposedly didn't spend on lowly earth type of flesh things.
Earthly pursuits.
They use that to copy old books and make beer, great beer, and drink beer and stuff, stuff like that. So it's all over humanity, Even the old shamanistic traditions, some of them don't have sex for a while before they take a ayahuasca ritual or other things. They don't have sex. Some of them don't eat or fast for a while and everything.
Just eat fruit.
Yeah, it's supposed to cleanse your body, because you're not busy with the lower chakras, with the lower material, beastly nature, our beastly side as human. We are spirit and beast, people say, a lot of religions. We have a spiritual, that's what we call human, our so-called higher side, trapped inside a beast, inside the material body, the flesh, just like other animals.
Yes.
And because of those practices, and practicing celibacy is one of the many tools used for all over time to so-called supposedly connect with spirituality, with your spirit, with your higher self, and disconnect a little bit from the beast, from this realm.
That was a good point about the sort of the denying yourself food, denying yourself sex. That sort of seems to coincide sort of with this idea of sort of denying the either I guess you can call it the lower chakras or the animal nature.
Monkey,
a lot of it has been practiced much more than you would think. Many traditions all over the world. And it's just one of the tools I see people have used to so-called connect to spirituality. There was a story of one yogi, Sufi mystic in India, who went into a river, in a cold, ice-cold river, in a dangerous river, with tides, and he strapped a rock around him or something, and he forced himself to stay in that river in the cold as long as he could, even if he would die, just to get into some spirit and higher self and higher level, to become enlightened. He risked his life, and a lot of them did.
There's a lot of weird things, like the American Indian guy, the American Indian guys that hang themselves off big hooks.
Yeah, the pain rituals. Yeah,
that's still in pursuit of air quotes the spiritual, isn't it?
I love pain rituals myself too, man. Pain is a great motivator.
There's some funny pathways to it. Yeah,
we're definitely now we're touching on, I think, Face's first point, sort of this rejection of the material. This seems to sort of coincide with that, sort of the rejecting the animal, rejecting the sex, fasting, denying food with fasting, and so on.
Yeah, denying the flesh, basically. Not giving into eating a lot, and basically almost punishing the body or trying to disconnect, basically, almost, it seems.
Yeah. So what is the, can we say, to someone who, let's say, is completely alien to all of these ideas, what is the point of sort of denying yourself these things, sort of restraining the desire for, or the urge for food, sex, and so on? What is the point?
I think it's to reach a new mental state, or something people feel lacking, or they get bored with what they've done before. At least me. I got sick of doing the same thing all over again. And I read about Buddha, that he had a phase in which he starved himself first.
Yeah.
And I saw a picture of the starving Buddha, like the skeleton almost once, from Thailand or something. And I was impressed by it. I thought, hey, I've always been eating a lot of food and doing training and everything with bodybuilding. I want to go to the other side. And then for a few years, I went to even longer, I went to the other side, many times, to see how it feels when you deny everything, which is very normal to, I've done a lot of intermittent fasting earlier this year for a few months. Only one meal in the evening and basically hungry all day, Ramadan. But I did drink water and ate some Himalaya salt to stay hydrated. And just to feel the pain, just to feel the hunger, and it forces you to eat, it makes you stressed. And then overcome it, but not giving into it. And then it goes away, and then you reach a certain kind of mental peace, some calmness for me. And it felt great. That's why I kept doing it for a while.
So peacefulness, calmness.
It's like reaching a state which you don't reach normally easily when you're busy with the normal things, when you just feed yourself, have sex and this, go into the pleasures and in the flesh. It's something which seems more lasting. Like when you have sex, you have an orgasm which lasts for a short while for males, and then it's gone. And later on, you feel like doing it again to get that state. It's like always there's a hole, to be filled, it seemed, which couldn't be filled for long. Every desire you fulfill, you get a new desire later. For every meal you eat, every lobster you eat, you want later one, or better. So it's never enough, like the materialism, filling your soul with materialism, they say, doesn't work. And so I figured that out, and that for myself, that there was something which was missing. So that's why I started to some of these practices to see, also vegetarianism and veganism later, to see what they do with me. Even a fruitarian diet for a while, just to play with it. Certain chemicals are used which shamanistic people used in the past to reach those states, and experiment and see where it ends up. How my inner landscape and mindscape changes. If it feels different, and if it gives me some temporary lack of desires, basically. So the urge to fulfill your desire all the time, go for this and this, the chase, to see if I can stop the chase for a while and have calmness and some more lasting sense of fulfillment, like a less intense but longer lasting orgasmic feeling for me.
Yeah. So it sounds like in some sense we're saying that the spiritual is the search for something longer lasting, something better, possibly for a practitioner to become some, if not superhuman, then sort of coming closer to becoming superhuman.
Better.
Becoming better. Yeah, exactly. So I guess it would be really nice to have now like one very dissenting voice sort of still objecting, well, this is still a useless word, this is still has no meaning.
I don't know if our buddy, a good friend Ethan, would be a candidate for that. I don't know his views about it, but he's in the chat. we can. I feel like until now we have been pretty civilized discussion and on point most of the time. And maybe we can handle 5 people. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Can we risk it? Should we risk it?
Who knows?
Who knows?
Uh,
Ethan might totally derail and destroy the conversation, but
Fuck everyone.
Well, I still have lots of points I haven't touched on, but if Ethan wants to, if he has something to chip in.
Yeah, I will demute him then. I mute. Yeah,
I've got it. I'm already in.
Ethan, are you there? Yo.
Yeah, I'm
go
here,
ahead,
dude.
man.
I'm here, dude.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah. The people having these like even the point of having like saying about the Sufi saints having these spiritual experiences, people gain this like this dopamine game from not just having these spiritual experiences, and also repressing these natural urges as well, because and putting them into different activities as well. But also, it's I think it's also the end. It's the benefit they gain out of it. It's more of the end conclusion that they tend to think, this was a good experience for me. Should I try this again? How could I improve this process that I have done to gain this dopamine boost, or to gain this higher consciousness to enter this what we call this spiritual realm. But I think that's pretty much only much I can sort of talk to on sort of the base service. I don't think I can sort of go into deeper to how I wanted to say it in, but that's my point, really.
You mean to say basically what I understood is like people go on the spiritual path to advance in a certain way and to become better or more than they were before, basically. It's like a school almost. Path. They call it a path also, the Sufi path to enlightenment. Path to enlightenment. So
it's a practice.
Yeah.
But so obviously when we say that we want to advance, obviously there's a lot of things we're not saying. So we're not saying you want to advance in, say, I don't know, let's say becoming a better biker. Would that sort of seems to me to be possibly irrelevant, unless of course being a biker is very necessary for you to get into a certain state?
So some people tend to thrive off these certain activities they do to get into these certain states. So even if it's simple as biking, running, but when they run, they might do a specific breathing technique while they're running. It might be the way they like where they run, which gives them this sort of experience. There's always, I think it's even with athletes, they have to, when they get into this sort of like zone mentality, they know they're in their game. It's like nothing can stop them. They're on top of the world.
It's like the spirit is on a maximum level almost.
Yeah.
I've often heard this from runners, that they are they run until they get into the zone, whatever that is. They get into some kind of mental space, different mental space.
Yeah, I've been there, man, before. So
Yeah.
it's like it's the same little bit of the same with the celibacy or the fasting type of effect. You feel in the same way, like you disconnected from your urges almost temporarily.
Yeah.
Like you lost your ego. Yeah, I don't want to call it ego per se, but something which commands you all the time to do this and this.
Yeah.
And when you run afterward, you don't feel the ground. It feels like you're floating while you're running. It's a weird feeling and fun. And I experienced that kind of stuff also during powerlifting and weightlifting too, after a while.
Did you have any sort of changes in perception of time or self, for example?
Yeah, it seemed like I lost the sense of time more easier during those states.
So you went into some kind of a flow state.
Yes, that's what I would call it. The zone, the flow. I think it's a synonym.
Yeah. So when we say, so for example, when we say, when people talk about getting into a flow state, does that, for example, equate to the spiritual, getting into a flow state? Because it sort of seems to me that I'm inclined to say there are people that would say I got into the flow state, but there was nothing spiritual about it, probably.
When some people get into the zone, it's more of it's like it comes and goes. So sometimes you'll be doing an activity, and then at this one specific time they just hit the right spot, and the whole activity just goes, like they enjoy the whole activity. I think there's this certain type of almost like thrill they get out of it when they're in this zone.
Yeah, it does feel very good. It feels so good beyond the normal perception of reality. And when you're agitated or stressed, it's the opposite of that. It's like orgasmic afterglow, almost.
So it does seem to be definitely some kind of a break from your normal way of being. Well, if not break, then it seems like the intention, if people are successful, to break sort of permanently into that kind of state of being.
Yeah, is that possible, even permanent, without any effort every day? Effortless, real.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, because if someone was this sort of comes into like the sort of neural, like the neural stuff as well. This is quoted by like. This has been experiments have been done by a scientist called Professor Sophie Scott. That if an athlete or a person does a certain skill for a long time, they regain this what's called expert behavior. So everything becomes second nature to them. But once everything becomes sort of second nature to you, like you don't have to think about hitting this zone. Like you're automatically in the zone already. It's just like it's become like your everyday thing. Like I think you just have no worry of what activity you're doing. I think it's only that one thing. If one thing goes wrong, then it just means.
Yeah, it seems people. I've seen some Japanese guys in a sushi bar. They do the same thing all over every day, and they go into some sort of Zen state or whatever, like the Zen Buddhists. Basically, do simple things all over again to lose the normal state and go into that other state.
Yeah.
So it's very general. It's not just sports, but it seems anything a human can do can be used to get there.
There's lots of ways to induce a flow. You look at ravers with their kind of predisposition to kind of like fire poi or hula hoops or juggling or those transparent balls or tai chi even is probably a better way.
Yes,
But there's lots of more gentle ways to get to a flow state.
Yeah, to something like a flow state, but I don't think every flow state is the same exactly. Or is it true? Is it all the same?
I wouldn't necessarily the same. I think everyone has their each individual different sort of flow state, but I think it's the way they exhibit the flow state might be differently to others, but others might have a similar connection to each other. So when they talk about their sort of experiences, they can sort of reflect off what new things they can do to exhibit new states of this sort of, or let's say, dopamine boost or thrill seeking in their life.
The reason I've asked this is like, now you have people who practice a sport and they get into the flow state and they're happy with it and okay. And you might have another person who has done the same sport and didn't get the same effect or wasn't happy with it and went into sadomasochism, bondage, and they like getting beaten up, with a whip, experience some more extreme pain, to get into maybe a different kind of flow state. I don't think it's the same, otherwise they just stick to running and not went to the next level, basically, to pain.
I think as well, even getting that boost off, having the pain from pleasure, it's a sort of it's a sort of thing where even if you've done it for an amount of like say over 20 times, it's almost like you want something new, so you just don't want the same thing.
So it's starting to sound like we're saying that the spiritual can. So we're obviously not now talking about. We're sort of moved on from the ethical part. I guess we can come back to that later. But it sounds now like we're saying that to get into a quote spiritual state is because it doesn't seem to be sort of dependent on any one activity. That it is mainly about maybe concentration in sort of becoming sort of very intensively involved in one thing.
I think so, because if somebody goes to a religious meeting, and they have with a group, they achieve some flow state too, but without pain, without running, with just being around each other, even in cults, even the Scientology people I've seen with a smile on their face, in the documentary.
I go to my local tabernacle and sing.
Yeah, I mean, they get some beneficial out of it, which we maybe call spirituality or flow state. Biochemically, maybe even could be measured if it is done. And that's why they keep going back to the same meeting, and not just religions, but other types of meetings too, even raves, with electronic music, we do the same.
Very much so. That's church for some people. For some people, that is church, absolute exactly. Church.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So we all have some activity, it seems, which we use. Some really go to religion, and some use something as a substitute for religion, and it's something else. But the end goal, it seems, it's eventually to get to some they call it non-ordinary state sometimes.
Yeah.
NOS. If you ever have seen Hare Krishnas dancing around in the city,
I love them.
They're on a spiritual high, man. They sniff some spiritual cocaine, it seems, man, which I would like to have. So they really, it's like they're taking some ecstasy pills without taking pills. They're happy as fuck. It's beautiful, man. I even get happy when I see them, when they dance around, and it affects me even without being religious,
Well, it's like it's almost like when you walk into like. It's almost like, do you know when you walk into like a certain place, Wanksy, and then you get like this certain vibe off it, It's almost like a bounce. It's almost like you walk into the certain atmosphere, and you don't know whether you're going to get a negative impact when you walk into that atmosphere, or you're going to get a positive impact when you walk into that atmosphere. But when you get that positive impact, it's almost like that impact reflects on you and how you think towards how you react emotionally, which is quite interesting when it comes to sort of like how music artists wear certain clothes to reflect. It's almost like how the way they dress affects the crowd. It's like there's almost like this psychology.
Colors, forms,
which is
and
quite
everything which affect us, and they do something with our. They input our brain, They create things in our brain, experiences. Yeah, it's basically a shared group spirituality. People practice a lot, come together and do something.
But it's almost like people's actions as well. They sort of like influence people feel, which is quite interesting.
So where are we? Do we feel like we are maybe a little bit closer to the definition of spirituality?
I would say we're close, but like, I don't think we can ever define spirituality under, say, religious terms or under activities. I don't think we can it's sort of hard to define the word. Most people that don't have these experiences would just discard this and wouldn't even give the word, just to remove the word out of a dictionary and wouldn't even give it like a definition.
Yeah, it would be too far away from their normal experience, life, of reality. And because they haven't been maybe to the other side, it's very hard for them to grasp something like that.
Yeah, I guess that's... You could say that if some of these states are very alien to everyone, then there's no language because no one knows there's no terminology because
it's a feeling. It's not something you can see and speak about.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm basically saying that we could basically, in theory, well, I'm going to theorize, we could probably, or maybe we could have terminology for these things, but the problem, the reason we don't have the terminology is because too few people have ventured to these mental states, at least of people that speak our language, for example, possibly.
What do you mean by people who speak our language? Do you mean English or?
Yeah. So let's say, for example, it could be locked in, somewhere in the somewhere out in the world, among people who speak, or part of a different culture, who speak a different language, or sort of are in some other way sort of, and they might be sort of, they might choose to remove themselves from, everyone else, other cultures, other groups, tribes, etc., or they do it unintentionally, but nevertheless they are in some way removed from everyone else. So if, let's say, there was a tribe or a group of people that do have sort of everyone, or maybe not everyone, but most of the people in the group, if not all, have gone to these mental states, then they, if they can sort of talk about the states, if they can sort of put labels on them, come to some agreement on the terminology, okay, if you do this, this, and this, you get into this kind of state, and we give this, this label, and if you do this other thing, you do this, this, and this, you follow this recipe, then you get into some other state, and so on.
Yeah, I think if everybody has experienced them with in a way which can give almost everybody that state, practice or a chemical or something else.
Assuming that, of course.
Then maybe they will develop some sort of language or symbolism. I think if people do share these experiences, it's still difficult to put them in words, I think people probably used more like drawings and diagrams and other stuff, or maybe even songs to talk about it than just words.
Yeah. So I think it's probably safe to say that it's possible that people maybe follow some recipe, but the experiences may differ, and in such cases, I'm sort of inclined to say that it would come down to sort of other influences in the mind. So, for example, maybe your physiology, your body is different. So if you follow the recipe, maybe your body will produce a different experience for whatever reason. Or I think the more likely possibility is that if you follow the recipe, but you don't, there's not a consensus on the experience that follows from following the recipe, that there are other influences coloring or distorting the experience, such as, just things in your mind, ideas, or just content in your mind that is
Maybe you're blocking the experience even. Placebo effect can be negative and positive both.
I guess that would be maybe another rabbit hole. Like why do we, like, if we are blocking an experience, why are we blocking?
Yeah.
Kind of like this idea that theists will sometimes, or some theists will sometimes accuse the atheists of sort of denying God, that they do experience, they do perceive God, but that they are in some kind of denial. And obviously, I mean, I've been on both ends. I've been a theist. I've been, if not an atheist, then at least a non-theist. Sort of want to be careful with the atheist label, because obviously, as with any of these terms, people sort of maybe fight about the sort of definitions. What really constitutes a label? What is the sort of really the definition of a label? But anyway, I would obviously to me, I would say that my experience is that I'm not aware of being in denial of anything. Like, I can entertain certain ideas or scenarios, but if I am in denial of anything, then I'm not aware of it. Guess that's the definition of a denial, probably. And I guess you can, it can go both ways. I guess that the atheist can accuse the theist of ignoring reality, that there is, the opposite is true. There really is no God, and you're just pretending.
Yeah, or creating up experiences in their head by believing something.
Yeah, I mean, I see no argument, sort of killer argument on either side. You can, if you're on one side, you can sort of project some kind of explanation as to why the other is the way they are. It sort of seems to go both ways. You can see it either way, it seems.
So it seems like programming we have in the brain, we have accepted as our script, can influence our experience. Like what we're believing about reality.
Yeah.
Do you have accepted as truth, or at that moment our software can influence greatly how we experience reality, spiritual beliefs or not. Like if you're an atheist, even if we have something like that happening, we might totally block it out and deny it. Up to the point that we consciously don't even feel it or experience it. And it all depends on the programming.
Or they would chalk it up to some kind of delusion or illusion. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, can our mind is powerful. Can our beliefs be so powerful that it can change our perception of how we experience reality so strongly that we can either deny things happening and make up things which aren't happening.
Something that was interesting when Milk, philosopher was saying that. I think he was saying he doesn't really deny, the create, a creator or whatever. But like, surely, I mean, if you don't affirm, isn't that kind of like a implicit denial? Do you know what I mean? Say if you say is A, and I say I'm not convinced, aren't I kind of denying A is A implicitly, kind of, or
you say that an agnostic is necessarily an atheist, as opposed to,
or I mean, at least, I suppose, like they're implying non-theism on some level, kind of, right, or not?
It seems to me, again, it could go both ways. You can be unsure and leaning to theism, or unsure and leaning to atheism. So I don't see why let's say the agnostic, someone like really on the fence, would necessarily have to go one way or the other. Or he's not really, I mean, he can also lean to one or the other, as far as I can tell. And he can.
Do you reckon is it even possible to be 100% in the middle? Meaning that even if you feel like you're in the middle, like you're not sure either way, you probably do lean one way or the other, right? In some sense.
I guess that depends what you mean. So, for example, I told someone, I think I've told Wangxi about this. So I've had, for example, an experience where normally I have no inclination for prayer, because from the perspective I seem to be locked into now, for lack of a better expression, is that I don't believe it. I don't believe I'm actually talking to anyone listening, and there's all kinds of things I could say about it. But at the same time, I have had an incident where basically an emotion can put me in a state where I will pray, even though I see myself or experience myself as a non-believer. So, for example, for me, what got me into that state was a friend of mine threatened to commit suicide. And I care about her. And since I was in no sort of position to help her, for some reason, the inclination for prayer just burst out, I guess you could say. But after it, I'm still sort of back to my not theism.
Sure.
But sure. I do acknowledge the experience happened. This did sort of burst out of me. But I would say basically what happened is, the only sort of thing I can say is that it seems that knowing of her suffering, or let's put it this way, I didn't have to actually know she was suffering. She could have been lying to me. So she told me something. She told me a story. She was going to do something, that she was suffering, and so on. I believed the story, whether it was true or not. I happen to think it was true. And as a result of the story, and believing the story, I start to suffer because, or the basically emotions arise because I'm helpless to help this friend of mine.
The urge to help.
The urge to help, something like that, yeah. But if I happen to be sort of, I mean, I've had plenty of situations where I don't want to say plenty of situations where I'm in sort of my life is in danger, but I've had sort of situations where I, for example, thought I was dying, for example, and the urge did not come. my friend dying or threatening to kill herself, then the urge came. So I'm not sure what exactly triggers or initiates this behavior, but I'm pretty sure it has something to do with this. There is a belief, and from the belief comes, or the belief and the story come emotions, and the emotions drive the behavior.
Right. Yeah. I mean, would you say is it at least semi-true that, like, you know, even like a hardened atheist, like when things are getting really terrible and they're desperate and say their wife is dying or something, they'll like drop to their knees and say, "Oh Christ, please help me! Don't let my wife die." Or is that even half true, or is that, you know, am I just kind of deluded, or what do you reckon?
Say that again. So someone drops to their knees praying.
Say for example, you know, say an atheist, his wife appears to be dying in hospital. He might drop to his knees crying and say, you know, "Christ, please help me! Don't let my wife die," you know, or "God help me," or "Lord help," you know, like, you know, they might not realize it's a prayer. To them, it's just a desperate cry out to the universe or to reality, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, it's like when they kind of drop a hammer on their hand, like, "Oh Christ," you know. They sort of tend to use that sort of terminology in their desperation, it seems, you know.
I guess you'd have to maybe ask the person themselves.
Sure, yeah, it's generic.
I mean, maybe they would say sort of, I don't like that terminology. It doesn't sort of quite fit what I was thinking, or they might say yes, it sort of, that sort of suffices to describe what was going through my mind.
Yeah. I suppose, yeah. Like, obviously, a Muslim probably would have a different vibe of prayer, but yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, but at least I suppose in the Western world, quite often, you know, an atheist who's suffering will kind of, you know, when they're really suffering and, like, say their friends are suffering, they seem to have these sort of prayers that come out, you know, even though they might not call them prayers. It's just desperate outbursts.
Well,
Face, hold on, I want to say one thing. Face, do you mean atheists who were previously Christian before, or brought up as a Christian, or people who have been brought up as an atheist and then even they suddenly start to call on God?
So I mean someone who might live and die as an atheist, technically, according to their mouth, what they say. But I mean that, you know, imagine, you know, let's say like it's Wanksy or Banksy or whoever, and you're like, you know, do you have any belief? No, I have no belief. Not really. Yeah. And then, well, Wanksy's different, but, you know, they say, no, you know, there is nothing, it's just all material. And then their wife, you know, is suffering, and then they might, you know, put their hands together and look up to the sky and say, "Please, you know, I'll be good this time."
I wonder then if the people who had Christian input or programming before in their life, they might probably do that faster according to their personality than an atheist who never had that input before. They wouldn't call on the Jesus specifically, I think.
Yeah, in the sense that they would never sort of go back to that programming, conditioning, behavior kind of thing. You mean?
So would an atheist, without using the word Christ, you know, like an atheist would say, "Oh my God," just when they're in the pub, like they're not talking about the creator of the universe. They use that as a way to talk about something bigger that they're not. You know what I mean? Just to create, you know what I mean? I mean, it seems, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but an atheist, when they're really suffering and their friends are suffering, they might say, "Oh my God, what is happening? Like, please don't allow this to go the full hog. I don't want to see my friends die." You know?
Talking, trying to reach out to a God, like deity, or they just use it in a way to explain the suffering to other people.
Well, I think it's somewhere between the two. You know, if you were to question them, they'd say, "Oh no, of course I'm not praying." You know, but they've got like a tear in their eye and their hands are grasped together.
You know what it is? Oh my God, and Jesus, even the term, have become so popularized. You know, here in the West, it is. Yeah, it's not meant literally by most people. You know, except Christians who really intended to, you know, mean it that way. You know, that's the issue. You know, in this case specifically.
I mean, it's like a bit like I suppose like what's that? You know, like the Jim Carrey film where he becomes, you know, God or whatever.
Bruce Almighty. Yeah.
Right, yeah, like that, like where everything keeps going wrong. He keeps going, oh my god, and then he ends up like, you know, can't remember exactly, but I think he crashes his car and he jumps out and he's like, why, you know, come on, you know what I mean? It's sort of that whole vibe. That,
Yeah,
you know,
he
he's a
should have.
non-believer.
He should have said, "Oh myself, oh me."
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that kind of, yeah, it seems like, you know, in people's desperation, they kind of cry out to the unknown, I guess, you know, in that,
Yeah,
know,
maybe
maybe
it is a human instinct. I don't know. We have, regardless of behavior input, you know, programming. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, even an agnostic doesn't know for sure where everything's from. So I suppose they're just appealing to that mystery, I guess, you know, in their desperation.
Yeah. So is spirituality hardwired to the belief in a deity?
Not sure. What do you reckon, Neil?
Well, I mean, it like, for example, if I were to take into account the I don't know if you guys are familiar with the tribe in the Amazon. There's basically a sort of non-theistic tribe called the Piraha. They basically would be described as, so there was a Christian missionary who went there some decades ago with the intention to Christianize them, convert them, and instead of converting them, they basically converted him or deconverted him. And they have a sort of very, I guess, empirical worldview, I guess you could say. They don't.
Well, you mean like empirical? You mean like if you can't see it or demonstrate it, then it's not true? That kind of worldview? Or?
Well, I don't know. Maybe empiricism isn't. I'm not entirely sure if that's the correct word. So, for example, they don't have any sort of concept of a god, and they have a special language. They have. I remember one thing about the language was that they call the heaven and earth the same thing. They have the same word for heaven and earth. It's not two things or one sort of two words or two concepts or two things. It's the same thing. They sort of conceptualize it as the same thing, or at least they have the same word for it. I think they called it Miggy, something like that. So I think one thing we haven't touched on either is how language can possibly sort of influence how we experience the world. And I guess that is a conversation in and of itself, as you know, you could say so many of the sort of other topics we have touched on or tried to touch on. And I guess you could say that the people in this tribe, in the beginning, they really had this sort of perception of God, but then they sort of decided to raise the kids in a way that they would sort of go into denial about this, quote, reality. So again, we're sort of going back to the thing we were talking about before. You can make an explanation for sort of either perspective, that the reality is no God and you make up the gods, or God is sort of the sense of God is what you really have in the beginning, but then you sort of go into denial. So I don't see any sort of easy way out of it unless we have some way to I don't know. It seems like the only way we could sort of determine this would be through science, I guess. And when I say science,
well,
I mean we would have to say again.
I was going to say it depends, because obviously when we're talking about the ethereal realm and the higher realms, science might fail. I'm not saying science cannot be used to infer creation or whatever, but it does seem, it does seem like it might be a limited tool for the job,
Depends what you mean by science. So, for example, maybe it can't be sort of approached with a sort of certain kind of science or certain kinds of sciences, so to speak. But maybe you could do it with, say, so for example, if I do a so for example, there's a practice in Buddhism where they will the recommendation or the practice is basically that you're supposed to count your breath. You're supposed to put attention on the belly, for example, and you're supposed to notice the belly going in and out, and you're supposed to count the breaths. So you count to 10, and then you go back to 0, you count again to 10, and you're supposed to do this for 5 years. When I say 5 years, I don't mean 24/7 for 5 years. I mean you're supposed to keep a regular practice for 5 years, count your breath every day, and then sort of you're supposed to come to some kind of change. Not change in the sense of you've reached the sort of you've reached the end of the spiritual game, so to speak. Not that there isn't more to sort of more what can I say, higher mental states to grow into, or higher mental sort of states to experience, and so on. But I do remember this recommendation from one spiritual sort of well, he's not really a motivational speaker, but like he's a spiritual teacher, basically, practitioner himself also. And I remember him talking about this, that you would count your breath for 5 years, and then only then you would have or you would be expected to have some kind of permanent change in experience. And I think I would argue, like, what is probably happening there, I think we are sort of coming back to the thing we sort of touched on earlier, which was this thing of breaking your prior mental states or your prior patterns. So, for example, if you count the breath daily, you are building up a habit of getting out of your normal state while you're doing that thing, one thing. Assuming, obviously, you've not been counting your breath prior to that practice, and I wonder if it's possible to sort of link anything maybe not beneficial to counting the breath. So maybe, let's say, hypothetically, you could, prior to that kind of a practice, you could have been counting the breath, but you had been doing it in a way that you had been linking stress to it, possibly. But I would definitely go for the explanation of if there is a permanent change, you are breaking some prior patterns, and you are building probably concentration. Sort of building this, building a habit of being able to go very deeply into one thing. Assuming you're doing the practice correctly, you're not supposed to be, let's say, I mean, of course you can count your breath while you're doing other things, but obviously that spreads out the attention.
It sounds like, just the way we're using the word spirituality tonight, it seems like, you know, the idea of mind doesn't matter seems a big thing, right? That you know, say for example, if your let's say your tummy tells you you're hungry,
yeah,
but a spiritual person would say, well, I'm gonna, you know, I'll let you eat when I'm ready. You know, like the mind decides and says, well, oh well, yeah, I am hungry, but you know, I'm in control of this, and I'm gonna, you know, I'll choose to do it when I choose to do it. That kind of, it seems that's implied in spirituality to some degree, right?
To some degree, yes, but I think we also have to take into account that I think we have been arguing tonight that spiritual experiences are dependent on the body, the state of the body. So if the body is very unhealthy, you are probably less likely to have, well, I'm not going to say probably. Let's say for the time being, you're possibly less likely to experience something, quote, spiritual. Then again,
the only place where this might break down is maybe if you're half starving to death, maybe you'd have a spiritual experience or something. I suppose it depends. I suppose it can just be triggered by anything. I suppose it's possible, right? Like fear of death or death itself could trigger, a spiritual experience, I guess. You know what I mean?
Extreme stress,
Yeah.
Well, okay, so there's one thing I can refer to now. I don't remember the exact timestamp, but I do remember. I think I posted it somewhere before on one of the sort of one of the servers we share, which is this idea that I think it's on a YouTube channel called Brain Sci. I don't know if anyone is familiar with that, the owner of that channel or the content. But basically in there is something like a 10-hour lecture by, I think his name is Todd Murphy. He's a neuroscientist, I think. And somewhere in one of these lectures, he says that the moment of enlightenment is marked by activity in the specific activity in the brain, and this activity is that he says there is something builds up in the right hemisphere of the brain. So there's a growing sense of fear. I think there was a growing, forget if I call this correctly, but there was definitely a growing sense of fear. And he mentions the brain structures that sort of have increased activity the moment before some kind of major spiritual experience. And when the moment of enlightenment happens, or the moment of this big spiritual experience, there is a bridge between the two hemispheres, and it's not the if you know something about the brain, it's not the big sort of cable between the two, which is called the corpus callosum, but it's a little bridge called the Anterior Commissure. I don't know if is anyone familiar with this? Probably not. Anyway.
No.
So he mentions this in these this 10-hour lecture. It's like I forget how many videos it is, but it's it's a couple of videos. It's 10 hours all in all, and I think it was at the end of one of these videos where he touches on this. I can probably find it after sort of.
Milk, if you find it later, can you post it in the topic spirituality channel?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Let me quickly check.
When you say like the two hemispheres, like there's a connection, like would it be like an electrical connection? Yeah, some kind of electrical jump across the two, yeah.
Yeah, that it seemed so. He said something along the lines of there is a buildup of something in the right hemisphere, and then there is a gush, or there is something that moves. I'm assuming it's some kind of a buildup of electrical activity or something that, for lack of a better expression, gushes over this bridge over into the left hemisphere, and then there is which is followed by a sudden sort of change in the mental state. So you go from fear and I think it was fear and relaxation into some kind of state of joy, ecstasy, joy, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
It's like almost like your brain, because of the fear and the stress, suddenly switches to another mode of operating, you know, beyond it, to relieve the stress, get out of it.
Yeah,
Almost
I
like
guess so.
escape, almost.
So it's kind of like, it kind of reminds me of the alcoholic who has to sort of go to he has to reach the bottomless pit before he can sort of...
Yes, the dark night of the soul, man, I like to call it sometimes.
Yeah. He has to have this like really bad experience before he can change his behavior. So see, at least that sort of reminded me a little bit of this, or this reminded me of that.
The long dark tea time of the soul.
To get the motivation, you know.
That sounded like a title from the Hitchhiker's Galaxy.
Douglas Adams it is, yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
The dark tea time of the soul. Wasn't that what you said?
No, the dark night of the soul.
Oh, the dark night. Oh, he said that.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought he added something about tea or something.
Yeah, there's the long dark tea time of the soul.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Same thing, yeah.
There's a song by Depeche Mode, you know, where he sings, "It's a dark night of the soul, and trouble is watching me, or demons are watching me," or something. I forget the song name. Trouble, I believe, is the song.
So, are we... I think there is actually one more thing I have not touched on. Sort of, I think last time when I tried to define the spiritual, I went sort of a little sort of different route. I think I started with something along the lines of the quote, spiritual is a great or search for some great truth. I don't know if that ring true for every one of you. Obviously not
search for the ultimate truth, maybe. Absolute
truth. Truth or ultimate truth.
Obviously not any truth. Not
absolute truth.
Well, some big quote, slash ultimate truth, whatever that means.
Yeah, the biggest thing from which everything else comes, basically a metaphor for God, I think.
It can be that. It can also be sort of like I guess you could say, the search for the answer, or sort of something you would find satisfactory to questions like, where do we come from, or where, like, is there life after death, as contradictory as that may sound, or an afterlife, or do we continue after death, or something along those lines?
You mean that the search for that is basically, we could call that spirituality too?
Search for death?
No, the search for the ultimate truth, like you were telling.
Yeah.
You could basically say that search for that ultimate truth is a form of spiritual practice or spirituality.
They're different things, really, I suppose.
They call it soul seeking, you know, they call it in popular culture.
I guess, like, when I say this, you know, it's about some kind of a search for some great truth. It sort of occurs to me that we're saying that you're looking... Well, I mean, maybe we can connect this to what we were talking about, that you're looking for a new mental state. So if you're looking for a new... some great truth, that you're looking basically to become maybe more intelligent, because if you're more intelligent, then you will, I don't know, you will either you hope to understand something you don't understand right now, or Yeah, I'm not sure.
So when someone mentioned death and everything, like that thing we was on about earlier on, the DMT and the spirit molecule by Dr. Strassman or whatever. Like I think he points out that, yeah, that's it. I think he points out that, you know, when someone dies, they may well go through the same kind of experience as the DMT experience, right? That there's a similar, you know, activity in the brain and similar accounts by both parties and everything.
DMT is a bit like experiencing death. It's a bit like a practice run.
Sure, yeah, which would be spiritual. I guess they both would be spiritual experience, I guess, in this.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah, I've been in a place where I thought, I could step out now, and I could actually choose to not return. Oh, I see how that works.
Like your spirit was disconnected from your body completely.
Absolutely, utterly, and totally. And I thought I could choose to not to come back now, but I will.
What was it on any specific drug?
DMT.
Okay, because I've heard someone say the exact same thing on LSD.
Okay.
Must be heavy dose.
Kind of like pulling a Jimi Hendrix one night. Just kind of go, you know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna, you know, slip on out, you know.
Didn't he do it in a puddle of vomit traditionally?
Yeah.
No.
He was voted. He was blindfolded before he died by someone's conspiracy theory. He got murdered on purpose.
It's a bit like Bruce Lee in that, isn't there? There's always a funny mystique around it all.
Yeah.
When you talk about this sort of, you said something about connection between DMT and the dying. That the moment before people die, they have a burst of DMT, something along those lines.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. The traditional thing is that there's a flash of DMT 9 weeks or 18 weeks into pregnancy. I think mothers as well have flashes of DMT when they give birth, and when you die. And I think they've proven it in rats, but I don't know. Have they gone further? The last time I looked, I know at that point they'd only really proven it in rats. But,
sure, yeah, it's one of those. They can't get the clearance to do it in humans so much, but it does seem that the science would hold. You know, it seems logical.
Yeah.
I want to mention the dying. So I remember reading something here about. I have a book about. It's basically a yoga book.
Yeah.
And there is there's a sub-chapter here, or just 1 or 2 pages where they talk about. It's about breathing patterns, and there is.
Yeah, basically fire breath and.
Say again.
The fire breath and like the short ones through the nose and out of the mouth. A few different breathing techniques, aren't there?
Well, I mean, there's
states.
There's all kinds of breathing practices, but the thing sort of that came to my mind, that because we're talking about DMT and the dying, is that there is a part around here somewhere where they talk about imitating the breathing pattern of the dying.
Oh, okay.
So they basically suppress their natural sort of urge to breathe, their natural frequency, and try to work themselves over many years into basically the physiology where the body is capable of breathing at the same frequency as a body that is moments away from dying, which is a very shallow, infrequent breath, I guess. I don't know. I'm not sure what, if there is if this is measurable in the sense that that there's a number we can put on it, I'm assuming you could put a number on it if this is some sort of very frequent thing that happens, some frequency of the breath. Assuming we're not talking about sort of dying people gasping for breath, because obviously that's going to be more erratic, chaotic, frequent, and so on. But this is very much the one of the goals of at least in yoga, where they are suppressing these sort of, so to speak, natural urges to get to something else. And in this case, I think basically the reasoning is that the breath is a gateway into mental states. So if you can arrest the breath in a certain frequency, you can have access to mental states you never have access to because you never go to that breathing frequency, kind of thing. And like I said, it seems to take a long time to train the body to get into, sort of train the physiology to be able to do this, because most of us are maybe gasping for breath long before we ever get into this breathing pattern. Assuming it's true, of course.
Yeah, it's not what I've heard of before. What's it called? Breathwork? I can't remember. What's his name? Pranayama?
Pranayama, that's...
Pranayama.
Yeah.
Pranayama is also what the Iceman uses.
Yeah. He does...
and Vipassana, I believe, both uses.
He basically encourages very frequent breathing, so like over breathing, as opposed to now we're talking about suppressing the breath.
Yeah, most of the ones I've are all kind of very kind of, you know.
No, but he also does holding the breath. He does both of it.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. But
yeah,
he's
familiar with kind of.
Say again.
I'm sort of familiar with the other end of the spectrum, but yeah, not really kind of that end. That's interesting.
Yeah, the frequent breathing, like hyperventilating.
Yeah.
I believe rises the oxygen in the blood, and the other one holding the breath creates more carbon dioxide and less oxygen.
Yeah,
it's opposite of each other, and it both influence the acidity, the pH level in the blood. Yeah.
I think the holding your breath makes it more acidic. Over breathing makes it more alkaline.
Yeah, something like that. One of both. Yeah.
I found the part that I was thinking of. I can read it for you here. It says basically here, numerous sannyasis admitted to us that the goal of pranayama was to make the practitioner enter the state called turiya, the cataleptic state.
Mm-hmm.
The reduction of respiration and of cardiac contraction to a degree that is usually observed only immediately before death in a genuine physiological phenomena, which the yogis can realize by force of will.
So they try to get less oxygen in and simulate like dying almost, basically.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the, David Carradine, how he died, with hanging himself and having an orgasm.
Say again, who was that? David who?
Yeah, David Carradine, from the series Kung Fu from the 70s.
Auto-asphyxiation.
Yeah, auto-asphyxiation. He died from auto-asphyxiation with himself, he hanged himself.
Like the guy from XS.
And then they went off to have an orgasm.
Yeah.
At the moment they're suffocating, close to death. And then they get the biggest high, that's what they do.
Oh, has no one else done that?
Yeah, but it's a dangerous practice, You can go too far and you can die,
It's very dangerous, yeah.
Yeah, some people are into that too, to get.
I might have tried it once or twice.
Yeah. I mean, have you never been choked before, man?
Obviously.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
even in sex games, that kind of stuff is used, man.
Yeah. But a lot of sex is about attaining different mental states.
So have we exhausted the topic, or are we? Is there more to it? Actually, I do have something more to say, but if you had something to chip in, please.
I know someone who's that guy, the UFC, the guy who's into UFC that does DMT. I can't remember his name.
Joe Rogan.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, he said he's got like a basically like, I think it's just a isolation tank. That's it. Yeah, where he can induce like a DMT like a effect.
Have you ever done? Yeah.
No, I haven't. I think it was 3 days, 4 days, and then he starts to hallucinate, something like that.
But in like a flotation tank.
Yeah, something like that, without no light or no sound, and he starts to hear things and see things that aren't there.
Yeah, and, exactly. I can believe that. I've done a flotation tank, and it wasn't long enough. And I don't know how many hours it was. I could have happily just stayed in there for a very long time, because that's a form of yoga in itself. I make music, and I quite like really oversensitizing my hearing. And I was looking, I think it's called Nada yoga, and I suddenly realised that's what I was doing in certain states. It's like deliberately hallucinating, like audio hallucination. Do you know what I mean? Like total silence and then inducing a sound. And then I realised that actually what I was doing apparently is a form of yoga, or according to some schools of thought.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm like a musician, so I hear music in my head all the time. Not like crazy, but you know what I mean. I can like, without humming a tune, I can hear the tune. I can create a tune in my mind without any humming. I can hear the music. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I like kind of induce it. It's sometimes like almost that thing about white noise. If you listen to white noise for long enough, you can hear anything. That's a kind of a phenomena in itself. I quite like it. I quite like if you've got a running tap or a running river or whatever. If you listen to it for long enough, and then you start to play with the hallucination, you don't need to be on any drugs. I quite like that as a practice. Do you know what I mean?
Is white noise the one that it's like almost impossible to tell the difference between like a frying pan, some water running on something, that
it's
kind
just
of sound?
It's just a hiss, yeah.
Right, yeah. So yeah, it could be. Yeah, I'm with you. You can interpret it in different ways. Yeah.
You can just construct it into an entire kind of I can construct sometimes a running tap into like a tune. It's like, all right, there's the drums, and I can hear the rhythm, and there's the top end of the. Yeah, okay. That's something I quite like doing.
Are you into? Sorry, real quick. You're into real music? Yeah, like guitar music.
I make but more electronic music. I'm not disciplined.
Okay.
I move squares around on a grid.
Let's.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Let's try to stick to the topic because we're recording.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can sort of talk later, I guess.
Yeah.
So one more thing I wanted to sort of add, because we were talking about this sort of trying to define spirituality and all that, was one thing I have not mentioned yet, which I have sort of used before trying to define spirituality, which is that often I think, like, if you look at the world religions, one summary you could give of what they do to you, apart from trying to get you into mental states or trying to teach you a specific sort of framework of ethics and so on, is that you could say that they are, in some sense, trying to mold you into becoming someone, becoming basically the role model of the religion. So, for example, in Islam, that would be Muhammad. in Christianity, that would be Jesus. In Buddhism, that would be Buddha, and so on.
I mean, that would make sense to me. I've always understood the want to sort of ascertain Christ consciousness, whereas to a lot of Christians, that's completely sacrilegious, and it's just an act. It's something external that you worship and say thank you to, and is a force that knows more, and you submit to. Whereas it makes more sense to me to want to ascertain those properties yourself. So yeah,
So
I guess it
they
depends
would,
on your interpretation of it. Yeah.
so they would or might accuse you of trying to become God.
I think some. I don't know. It's for some people that I know, kind of a sacrilegious outlook. You know, sort of the ascertaining Christ consciousness, or kind of. Whereas to some, you know, it seems to make more sense to me.
Okay. And another thing that I sort of want to make sure finds its way in here is that after religions have sort of tried to get you into this place where you have become the role model, you have become sort of as close of an approximation of the role model that the belief system is trying to mold you into, is that at some stage there is, because I know the Buddhists and the Christians talk about this in some sense. You could argue that the Christians talk about, or the Bible has a verse about dying to self, and Buddhism has this concept of nirvana, where there is the self. There comes some kind of an end to the phenomenal self, in some sense, meaning that because I guess it can sort of be summed up in the sense that they believe the personality is, in Buddhism, that the personality is a manifestation of your thinking. So the thoughts make the man. And if you root out all the thoughts, then there is, in some sense, the self ceases to exist, because the patterns, the conditioning, the algorithm, so to speak, of the personality is no longer there. I mean, I've heard of cases where basically the practitioner becomes so helpless that they need to feed him after they have this sort of big breakthrough experience. And at the same time, you also have people who claim they have some big experience. They, in some sense, or they claim to have claim to have lost the self, or some self they identified with earlier. Whereas they, from anyone sort of looking from the outside, they may not appear any differently. They may seem to, maybe they don't have all the sort of same behaviors. I know of one guru that even after, quote, enlightenment, he continued to smoke. He smoked like a chimney. And having that experience did not make him stop smoking. So
yeah, well, I'm just thinking I can relate to that, because for years and years I didn't smoke, and I was all kind of like, no, even if I smoked a bit of pot or something was in a pipe, do you know what I mean? I just didn't smoke any tobacco, and I was very, very anti-tobacco. And then I had a massive ayahuasca experience, and shortly after that I started smoking.
Did it feel like you got a sort of vacation from the pattern, and then sort of you went?
I don't know. I'm just maybe used it in reverse, went the wrong way. Sure, but yeah, maybe I realised it didn't matter. I don't know. Yeah, the same, the wrong way around. I was very much healthier, and I had a huge kind of ayahuasca experience, with the most close to religious experience I think I would say I'd had, and it was days after that, I thought, oh, fuck this, I'm going to have a
But tobacco is used in. But tobacco is used in South America a lot as a spiritual tool, doing rituals.
I have this like ultra like hyper sensitivity nowadays to tobacco. I just can't smoke. If I have half a cigarette, quarter of a cigarette, I have to lay down and pant for like 10 minutes. Like I think I'm going to die. No crap in it. Yeah.
Lucky you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I try and avoid
natural aversion.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't feel very spiritual, put it that way. When you feel like you're dosing on nicotine, it's rough. But yeah,
Does this this thing that I said about becoming someone and then dying to the self, does this to you conform to Christianity, your interpretation of Christianity, or does it feel like it goes against it in some way?
No, I think it conforms as long as I think the idea is that like the self is like self-centered and fleshly, and then the idea is that you're supposed to adopt spiritual, like a new self, a new spiritual self that's more focused on the things of, say, Christ or righteousness or others than the self. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
That was the next thing I was going to add after, at least in this sort of model that I have, which is that most of the world religions or belief systems, or these sort of spiritual belief systems, they have this recipe, or they seem to have this agenda to make you become somebody, and then make you become nobody, and then after you become nobody, there's no selfishness there's no sort of like a selfish acting character only acting in the world for his own gain, for his own self, is no longer there, in which case it seems like he becomes, for lack of a better expression, a tool of selflessness. And I guess we could say he becomes a being without a self. Most of us have a self, but he has no self. And I guess in the absence of the self, he's not acting for his own gain, which I've already said, I guess. In which case, he has to act on the conditioning, the molding, the shaping that the belief system conditioned him into. So, for example, if he was trained to become be very compassionate, then even after the self, there is maybe we should also sort of tread lightly on saying there's no self, because I think it's probably not necessarily accurate either to say that there is no self, because I think what some of these people will say is that the self will not disappear, not entirely. It's not that they will become drones or robots. They still exist in the body, or some part of them. They exist. They continue to exist as, let's say, awareness, or as a witness, as an observer. But anything that they identified with, any thinking patterns, anything sort of identifiably their personality, assuming it is a sort of like switching off, turning on a button or switching personality off, then that goes away in the sense that in the first person experience, there's no subjective identification with that personality, meaning I guess that means the thoughts, either the thoughts go away or there's no identification with the thoughts. So they might you could imagine they might continue somewhere in the background, but there is no acting out on them, or they sort of become sort of more objectified, maybe, from the subjective perspective.
Like, yeah, I guess they take a back seat, right, to the you know, almost like Christianity talks about two selves, kind of, you know, like the new self and the old self, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And the old self was the sort of the selfish, more selfishly acting kind of thing.
Possibly, at least in that religious sense, because, like, you know, obviously someone who's an atheist, complete atheist, can be completely kind and loving, but they're not necessarily to the one who made them, you know. So they'll love the physical people around them, but they'll say, oh no, but, you know, there ain't no truth in anything but that. You know what I'm saying? You know, let's say Christ created them.
Could we say that the transformed person, the one who is reborn again into, you know, the new times, it's basically someone who feels the spirituality more directly in their experience, daily life, than previously?
Or at least they have done at some point, right? That I suppose that would be the idea, that they, you know, receive a spirit, and then, you know, and then from then on they acknowledge, wow, no way, okay, I was being, you know, dishonest with myself before, you know, denying this, denying that, you know, that there's a spiritual reality to existence, and, you know, basically they turn from the way they were towards, at least in theory, towards, you know, a spiritual path towards Christ, or whatever it would be.
Could I say that some try to achieve enlightenment or transformation with meditation and other tools, and others try to get there by doing a baptism, you know, basically, in Christ?
I'm not sure. I mean,
maybe not the
I've never
same
been
exactly. Yeah, maybe not the same exactly, but it's
it could be linked,
transformation. Yeah, but I mean, it's a transformation from the former self, you know, to something new, better.
Yeah, some kind of, like we were saying earlier, like a mind over matter, where they're, you know, trying to sort of contradicting the flesh in a way, guiding it, saying, well, okay, yeah, you want to do this, but yeah, you want to go and play video games, but no, in fact, we're gonna do this spiritual experience over here, or, you know, I don't know.
I think it all has to do with transformation or something, it seems.
Yeah. I mean, there's a really amazing quote, and I don't know who it came from, and it's really cool. It's really clever in that. It says, I don't know where it came from, but it goes, you're not a physical being having a spiritual experience. You're a spiritual being having a physical experience.
Yeah, so you basically shift your awareness back to the spiritual part and experience it as a spirit in a body, in a material world, instead of as a body, as a piece of flesh only, you know, with some spirit. So it's awareness shifting completely.
Yeah, I think so, yeah, something like that, yeah.
So where are we at?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, would it be worth reading, you know, someone like you, philosopher, like reading the definition out of Wikipedia or something, or a dictionary, just to see if it's going to conform, like, remotely to what we've been talking about or not?
Yeah, let's try that. So okay, in Wikipedia it says the meaning of spirituality has developed and expanded over time, and various connotations can be found alongside each other, blah blah blah. Traditionally, spirituality referred to a religious process of reformation, which aims to recover the original shape of man, oriented at the image of God, as exemplified by the founders and sacred texts of the religions of the world. The term was used within early Christianity to refer to a life oriented toward the Holy Spirit. It sounds very Christianized. And broadened during late medieval times to include mental aspects of life. There's a hyperlink to definition, and there it says basically there's no single widely agreed upon definition of spirituality. Surveys of the definition of the term as used in scholarly research show a broad range of definitions with limited overlap. A survey of reviews by McCarroll, each dealing with the topic of spirituality, gave 27 explicit definitions, among which there was little agreement. This impedes the systematic study of spirituality and the capacity to communicate findings meaningfully. Furthermore, many of spirituality's core features are not unique to spirituality. For example, self-transcendence, asceticism, and the recognition of one's connection to all were regarded by the atheist Arthur Schopenhauer as key to ethical life. According to Keyes, why each The traditional meaning of spirituality is a process of reformation which aims to recover the original shape of man, the image of God. To accomplish this, the reformation is oriented at a mold which represents the original shape. In Judaism, the Torah. In Christianity, there is Christ. For Buddhism, Buddha. In Islam, Muhammad. Yeah, like I said earlier. Hootman and Ospers suggest that modern spirituality is a blend of humanistic psychology, mystical and esoteric traditions, and Eastern religions. In modern times, the emphasis is on subjective experience and the deepest values and meanings by which people live, incorporating personal growth or transformation, usually in a context separate from organized religious institutions. And then there's more writing on the development of the meaning, classical, medieval, and early periods of modern spirituality. There's two. I'm not gonna read all of it. And there's there's the reference spiritual but not religious.
Yeah, we've checked a few of those boxes, I think, haven't we?
I think we've definitely covered some of these things. But I'm curious if sort of anyone less opinionated on the topic, what would they add? What would they dispute about what we have said so far? And have we exhausted the topic?
Well, I'm not sure. Yeah, the only thing I think is like, and it sounds a bit weird because the way we use it in context today is different. But like, let's say someone who's a Christian who believes that, you know, Christ is the spirit, and that themselves is a spirit, and that everyone is a spirit, right? You know, or has a spirit.
Yeah.
Would someone like that, you know, who, let's say they don't deny themselves, let's say they eat well, they sleep well, they have fun, they eat chocolate, they drink alcohol, they have sex, would someone like that be considered spiritual? I suppose it's all contextual, right? They believe in spirits and the spiritual realm, but they're not necessarily a typical kind of, you know, joss sticks and kind of, hey man, spiritual, you know what I mean? It's sort of contextual again.
You mean, are you talking now about someone who is subjectively spiritual but does not sort of outwardly seem to fit the role?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I suppose it depends all on that context of the role. You know what I mean? That, you know, depending on what it means, you know. So that's what I'm saying. Like, could someone who believes in the spiritual realm, for sure, and believes they are a spirit or have a spirit, you know, you'd think that would be spiritual, right? Because, you know, we said the word spirit over and over again. But then again, it doesn't conform to that typical, you know, sort of starved and, you know, and kind of that typical kind of almost like Buddhist spirituality, which is different, right? That kind of deny thyself. Even though Christianity has deny thyself, not all Christians will do that. But then again, they believe in the spiritual realm. So I suppose it's all contextual what it means. That's like that. Like it said, there's 27 definitions and none of them seem to overlap very well.
I think this probably applies both to Christianity and Buddhism, that both have, I mean, not necessarily every school and sect, but I think some of them definitely will overlap in believing in a sort of another realm. I think most of them do the thing with the denying yourself and so on. For example, I know both in Hinduism and Buddhism there are sort of beliefs in levels of heaven. I think they called them lokas. So there's the 6 lokas of Buddhism. In early Buddhism, based upon the Pali Canon and related agamas, there are 4 distinct worlds. There's the Kama Loka, or world of sensuality, in which humans, animals, and some devas reside. Rupa Loka, or the world of defined material existence, and blah blah blah. Okay, so anyway, my point is made. The Buddhists also have this idea of another realm, regardless of whether all of them believe in it. And like I said, maybe it's sort of restricted to some sect or school and so on.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know as well, Buddhism is normally atheistic, right? I know obviously it doesn't have to be atheistic, but in general, right? Am I right? It's, you know, there's no strict, you know, being within Buddhism, right?
I'm not sure I would use the word atheistic. Maybe it's proper to use it.
It's not worship of an external, is it?
I personally would probably use the word non-theistic. Maybe that sort of, to some people, means the same thing. I guess it depends on, again, sort of your definition of atheist. Is it sort of, does it affirm, or does it just not answer the question, or is it not concerned with whether there is a God or not? Which would be sort of more like apatheism. You don't care whether there's a God, but you don't necessarily assert there is no God.
Sure. I mean, I know, like, obviously it sounds a bit religious, but Christ said you're either for me or against me. So I understand that some people say, well, I'm not for you, I'm just not against you. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? But the thing, I mean, I tend to use the word atheist in the word of non-theist. You know, to me, it's pretty similar in that. But but I suppose it's all contextual again.
Yeah, well, it sort of all comes down to convention of usage. So I would, for example, say that at least sort of the way I've sort of gotten used to it is that a baby is not an atheist. An atheist is someone who has sort of thought about it and
Developed it.
Say again?
Has developed it.
Yeah, he's somehow come to the view or the opinion, whereas a baby is just more like has no idea. I mean, any more than a dog kind of thing. Like,
yeah, some atheists, and I'm not saying that they're right or that they thought it through, but some atheists actually posit that atheism is the default. You know, they claim almost like, that all babies are born atheists, and then they're indoctrinated by evil, crazy religious folks into believing,
No, because I had really far out kind of trips, child kind of sitting in the grass, and I remember having this experience like a trip, and it was a bit like that Homer Simpsons episode where he zooms out from macro to like from atom to universe. That one.
Sure.
That clip where I literally had that experience sitting in my garden at some ridiculous age, about 3, and and it was a memory that always stuck with me. And a few times that Simpsons clip, I've seen that it resonates. It doesn't matter to me why it resonates, but I haven't been indoctrinated by anything. That was a spiritual experience.
Sure. And then someone like Satan Brunike. Yeah, someone like Satan Brunike. It's quite rare. It's not often you'd hear a claim like this. It's quite extreme, but I'm not saying he's wrong. But he says that he claims that all babies at all ages know for a fact that the Most High exists. You know what I mean? That, in other words, they might not be conscious of it, but he says they just know, and that in other words, that they base all their knowledge off of that, and then they know that when they cry, someone will listen, or when they do such and such. You know what I mean? But this is Satan Brunike. Obviously, he likes to do that and use Christ as the fundamental underlying principle for all things.
I have to admit, when I was a very young baby, I was oblivious. I do not remember whether I was aware of or knew much of anything.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying I sort of knew about. I remember having sort of quite cosmic kind of flashes as a child.
Or having like a 24/7 perception of like something you would describe as a god. I suppose that's possible, but I don't remember that from my childhood. I'd be interested if anyone sort of had that.
As a child, our brain isn't developed fully, they say. It's only after 24 years. So I wonder how an undeveloped brain could maybe trigger these experiences even faster or not. I wonder.
Well, to be honest, some of us even after 24 years, our brains are still not developed.
Yes.
That's true. Yeah, I'm guilty of that. But because a child's brain is different, I suppose. And I've heard that younger children, babies and stuff, have synesthesia. They all
see colours and hear.
Yeah, they're all mixed up, and that's how we start normally, naturally.
Hear colours.
Within that experience, and then later on, our senses divide. We cut them in pieces, like this is smell, this is touch, and our brain divides everything, and then we become more functional into reality. We're basically tripping balls, as a baby. That's how we start.
That's decent.
We're on a high dose of DMT LSD 24/7, possibly. We don't know.
Absolutely tripping balls eventually make sense of it.
Because we forget everything, You know, when you have a trip, a psychedelic trip, you forget everything. You know, maybe we forget everything we experienced as a baby too, because we were in a different mind state, flooded with chemicals we don't have now. Unless you're a hippie, you know, you're not scared of acid. If you embrace the acid, then you're a child again.
So is the topic exhausted yet, or should we try to look for more definitions or more inputs? I think I've exhausted at least anything I can think of at the moment. I think we've sort of touched on most of it, I think.
Yeah.
Like I guess this is one of the reasons why I was sort of inclined to say that it was not impossible to try to define it, because regardless of whether there are more definitions, I think I have said, well, if not everything, then at least I can't think of anything else to say on the topic. So I'm inclined to say that I've exhausted the topic, at least for me in this moment. But if you ask me the right question, I might actually sort of have something to add. But I can't think of it unless and until I can think of it.
It might be that we have spilled our load. we need to recover, and maybe in a few weeks we will have more to spill on this topic.
We've peaked.
We had a peak experience. We are in a flow state right now. I'm serious. Sometimes after some chats, I feel like I'm fucking high, man. After some chats, you know, when they're good and you're different mind state, man.
Should we have an afterglow?
Yeah, like a healthy afterglow after some Discord chats, you know. That's what I try to get out of it anyway. I try to get a net positive out of it and not a negative. Yeah.
I have a halo now after the.
I feel it light.
I've become so holy. The discussion just.
You lit up your chakras. Your chakras flowing.
I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening right now. Thank you very much, brothers. I think it's a miracle of Vanxiism.
It must be.
It's Vanxiism miracle, man. The great vanker in the sky is touching me, man, in my brain. Yeah.
There was one thing I think we did not touch on. We were talking about sort of denying the flesh and all of that.
Yeah.
We did
at the
not,
beginning, yeah.
We did not talk much about weeding out sort of bad behaviors or sort of not behaviors that are not wanted.
7 sins? That's 7 deadly sins.
Yeah, I guess,
like
you know, like greed comes to
mind. Greed, overdoing it.
Greed,
going
gluttony,
the other way.
Greed, gluttony and everything. Yeah, it's like basically going into the flesh, being completely absorbed by the flesh and its desires, it seems. Because the flesh wants more, it's greed. It wants more food, you know.
Gluttony is just another word for greed, I guess.
Overeating, greed with food, basically. I can't remember the other sins, man. Lying is one of them. Stealing.
Lust. Gluttony, greed.
Yeah, lust is the greed for flesh, for sexual experience.
Yeah, I guess you could say.
It's all still governed by greed. Yeah.
Sloth is basically laziness.
It's greed for inactivity.
Not sure I would sort of conceptualize that as greed.
Greed, desire, you know.
I can see what I can see what he means though. You could draw that distinction. I can see what he's saying. He's saying that, you know, it's a form of greed, right? It's, you know, it's wanting as much and as relaxation as.
So, I'm doing nothing. I want more
you want to overdo. You want to overdo.
Yeah.
It's about overdoing something.
Yeah.
Being greedy for them.
Yeah.
Up to a point that they become detrimental to your health, to your body, to your spirit, to your temple of God. You know. Yeah. And maybe that's why they want for it. And it's basically all greed because you want too much of something.
It sounds like the 7 deadly sins are basically, well, I guess you could summarize some of them into the middle path kind of thing. No extremes, maybe.
I'm a
No,
fan
it
of
is-
the middle path.
No, but it is extreme, the 736, because you overdo it. You go
Yeah,
into
yeah.
extreme.
Well, I think I would definitely put gluttony, greed, and sloth under overdoing something.
Yeah,
Lust.
but lust too. Yeah. If you
Yeah,
go too much into lust, you're overdoing your sexual desires. You're becoming an addict. You're losing your soul, man.
But again, now we come sort of to the definitions of the word, because you can lust for someone in your heart, but not be overdoing it.
Yeah, but the lust, it's being in lust too much itself is an overdoing, because your spirit goes away from God or whatever and into something bad.
So we're back to saying that spirituality is about lusting for God as opposed to
Instead of lusting for human
material
level.
things,
Yeah,
Flesh.
flesh. Yeah,
or lusting for nirvana as opposed to
yeah.
a new car.
Basically, you could go nirvana, God, something else. The Allah, whatever. It's okay to lust after something which is not from the flesh and this plane, this earth, because this earth will die. We will die. Our body will die. It's not forever.
Yeah.
So it's very, yeah. You have to go for the something which exists forever, and not for something which is transitory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Deny the temporal.
Yeah.
Yeah, Christ actually said something about this, like similar, that connects. Like he said, don't put your heart, or can't remember the exact wording, but it's something like, don't put your heart in things like of earth that, like, where thieves come in and steal, and moths, decay and rust decays, but put your heart in, put your treasure in heaven, like where moth and rust and thieves do not, break in, steal, and decay. That kind of same kind of concept.
Yeah. That's what came up to me with the 7 deadly sins.
Yeah.
Sure.
And Buddhists call this world Maya too. It's basically almost
Illusion.
the same. Yeah, it's an illusion. Like the Buddhists say, you have to go to Nirvana, and this world is Maya. It's all fake. It's an illusion.
Yeah.
And Christians and even say basically the same in another way. Don't go for this temporary world. It's just dirt. We will turn to dirt. It's not our real spirit.
Yeah.
Muslims also focus on the afterlife. And they don't even go for this world normally. They don't care about this world. It's why they're ready to die, for God.
And
As a martyr.
Hindus
Yeah.
too. They sort of deny this world for the other world, or the better world.
Yeah. So it seems a common theme in many religions. It seems, maybe all.
Apart from those who sort of have this view of embracing this world.
Yeah, I mean,
Which
have you
one?
noticed though that like the Islamic heaven is very, like, it seems quite materialistic, right? It's like, it's got,
paradox.
yeah. I mean, Caesar, we got like literally rivers of wine and girls everywhere and a permanent hard-on and that kind of
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems. Yeah.
Doesn't the Christian heaven have milk and honey?
Yeah, probably got milk and honey and virgins and that, but it's just different vibe. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, but they will say it's a metaphor, milk and honey, or maybe even the Muslim heaven is a metaphor for something else we cannot grasp because we can't know anything about heaven because we're in this mind and brain. That's what I've heard as an argument, for many things.
Yeah, it does seem, doesn't it? It does seem though just a tad materialistic though. It just whereas because like when I first came into Christianity, I was disappointed. I was like, oh come on, you're telling me that no sex, none of this in heaven, none of that in heaven. But but now I see what it means. It just as you get older and mature, you realize like a lot of these things are just like they're just phases and fads and that. But to truly be in a state of nirvana, let's say forever and ever and ever, you wouldn't be needing or wanting. You'd be maybe just being able to just cuddle a girl, for like 1,000 years would be nice. You wouldn't necessarily need sex. It would be a different vibe altogether. You know what I mean? It's just supposed like true love as opposed to mechanical thing.
I think I mentioned in a conversation, earlier conversation with Wangxi and someone else, basically in the sort of Islamic heaven when you have the virgins and all of that. I argued that basically, and I guess I would still argue that for the creator of the religion, as I see it, the virgins are not necessarily there because you're supposed to believe they are literally there. They're only there as a carrot to motivate you to practice until you sort of grow out of your lust.
It does, yeah, but I mean, I think it's like I was just laughing a second ago, like it seems paradoxical, right? It's saying, yeah, you're surrounded by all of the, this world is fallen and full of lusts and drugs and wine, but hey, you're not allowed any of that. Don't look at it, don't think about it. But hey, when you get to heaven, I'm going to just shower you in girls and wine, and it just seems such a paradox. It's like the opposite of the Christian heaven. Where in the Christian heaven, it's like, yeah, okay, you can, do things you want to do on this earth, but don't think that that's how it's going to be forever and ever. It's not how it's meant to be. Yeah. And then in Islam, it's like, no, it's going to be that way. You're not allowed it now, but it will be that. It seems like exact opposite.
Yeah, I'm quite looking forward to when it all goes away. I've got 72 virgins of either sex. Fuck that. Sounds like hell.
Definitely, if you take it, if you take it literally, then it like you said, it does sound like a paradox. But if it were, like I say, just to motivate, then you really have to look very differently at it. You could say it's their way of denying the flesh.
Yeah.
Sort of say, okay, you have to deny everything in this world because that's the only way we can get you to deny this world. Because you have to sort of buy into this worldview that you can do the things after you're dead, but in this world you can't do it. It's like I said, it's another way.
It's a good motivation.
It is such a paradox, though. It's like saying, look, the things, you're in a fallen world now, and all the things that you want to do, you won't be able to do now, but you can do them in a perfect world. All of the things you want to do now are away. It just seems like how?
But we're sort of coming back to this idea of denial of the flesh, denial of the temporal, in the sense, at least in this existence. But obviously, if you're going to have literally 72 virgins, then it is, like you say, it sounds kind of like a paradox that you get the things that you deny yourself.
They will have rivers of wine, Now they can't drink alcohol.
Yeah. So
it's weird because it sounds almost a little bit hypocritical. If wine is bad in this world, house and fornication is bad, and you have very strict rules, and you will get stoned to death if you do adultery. But in the next realm, you can have an orgy and wine. It's no problem. Under the guidance of God, He will look at you and be pleased with you fornicating all day long.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? It does seem.
You have to do some mental gymnastics to accept that stuff,
It is wild. Obviously, it's super appealing to Muslim men who, let's say, they're never allowed to kind of look at this woman or do this thing or do that thing. Then when they're told, hey, like eventually you'll get there, then no wonder they blow themselves up.
You would be keen, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Should we conclude the recording, or what do you guys think? We've pretty much exhausted it for tonight, maybe.
I'm gonna have to step out for a second anyway because 8% battery.
Yeah. Sure. It's up to Wankley. I'm cool either way.
Yeah, I'm cool
I'll
too.
pop back for the formal chat later.
Yeah, I think at least we finally started. I'm happy with that. And, with the technology, and I think we had a pretty good chat, man. According to me, it was pretty good quality chat, and I enjoyed it. And maybe we should next week or next time touch another topic, and then come back to this one after some weeks, like Milk sometimes proposes.
Yeah.
Like, touch back on it later with other people, maybe, or a bigger panel if you can handle it.
Yeah. And the goal, as I see it, would always be to, if it is sort of, if it is realistic, to make some kind of a flowchart or spidergram or something, so that we have some kind of notes, sort of easily accessible notes, to see what we touched on
Yeah, Wanks has already done a
quickly.
pretty good job of notes actually. So
Yeah, I've been basically like a secretary, you know. I've been putting in bullet
secretary with banana fingers.
like secretary. Yeah. The thing is, I hate it when I chat next week. I forget everything, you know, maybe, and I think it's waste. So I'd rather just type everything in we say as bullet points.
Yeah.
So I hope the next time I read the bullet points, it might trigger back the conversation for me in my mind, you know. When we touch the topic next time, we can all go to the bullet points and be free to add bullet points yourself too, you know, during the chat. It's all okay. And then we we're just not doing the chat, but we at least using our brain too, you know, it's on an extra level.
Well, I mean, regardless of sort of what you use to trigger your memory of what we have covered or not, whether you use a spidergram, you use a long list of bullet points or something.
Yeah.
I think the ideal, if realistic, is that we don't have to repeat the same conversations
again.
And again. Yeah. It seems a little bit pointless if we have the I know we don't we very it's very unlikely we have the exact same word for word conversations, but it seems it seems sort of like if we have the same thoughts come up again, and if there's nothing new really coming up, then it seems sort of waste of time to
go over it again and again and again.
Yeah, it just seems more efficient just to have some way of quickly accessing the same, notes somehow.
Yeah, we can also do the following, you know, if one of us has points in their brain coming up in the next few weeks or later, maybe we can just go to the topic spirituality and put some notes in there, add on, and when we have a longer list of added notes from many people, then that might be a feedback signal to know, hey, now it's maybe good to have another conversation.
Well, yeah, if we see like there's a buildup of points that never came up in the discussion, because like the Wikipedia page seems to suggest that there is a sort of huge non-consensus, for lack of a better expression, and we like to think we came to some kind of a consensus. I like to think, but yeah.
The thing is, after this chat, you know, during the week, I always think a lot. New things will pop in my mind, you know, relating to this. This will affect me for the whole week, not just today. You know, and I'm sure new things pop up which didn't pop up right now because our brain is limited. It doesn't operate with everything right away. And I will just add everything which comes up in my mind. I will add in the list. For myself at least, and if everybody, make your own list or put it in there, you know, it's free will. And if we have enough more material to talk about, you know, then it's a good time, I think. And then we can build up on the previous conversation and move it next level. In the meantime, get another topic, man.
Sounds good.
So for each topic we want to exhaust, I want to make a different topic channel to put all the information in one channel. Structure it. And I will make a general info chat channel too, in which you can propose new topics, you know. Or in planned events maybe, you know, in there. If you have topics you want to discuss or exhaust, just put them in planned events, and then we can plan them in, put the date on it. In the panel member list, and then do it again.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Cool.